Is this live? Good evening and welcome to the UU Church of Brunswick and via YouTube. My name is Lynn Ellis. Tonight we present a candidate forum providing an opportunity to get to know your candidates. We invited all candidates from House Districts 49, 50, 51, 98, 99, 100, 101, and 102, and Senate Districts 23 and 24. It's a busy time for candidates, and we are very pleased with the 8 candidates here with us who were able to attend. On the screens overhead, you will see the names of the candidates and the towns that they represent. UUCB's Working for Justice Steering Group is the host of this forum in partnership with the League of Women Voters and Curtis Memorial Library. Our group is dedicated to nonpartisan politics. I will take time now to thank our volunteers who made this possible. So the organizing team is myself, Betsy Williams, Donna Chiel, Renee Manamitis, and Hazel from the library. Did I get everybody? And well, I'm going to get to her. So housekeeping. The bathrooms are at the back of the church. There's 4 of them through those double doors. And exits are located, one over here, and then throughout the building that way. We do ask you to silence your cell phones if you're able to, or anything that makes noise. Okay, let's get started. So, Carol Evans is moderator extraordinaire and is going to work us through this process tonight. So we hope you enjoy it, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Lynn. So my job is to go through the pieces of the evening so that everybody's on the same page, and then get started with getting to know your candidates. This is a nonpartisan evening. It is not a debate. And for that reason, we're asking all of you to remain silent. In other words, you're writing questions in a basket that we have up at the back, and we'll be collecting and we'll be looking for which questions gain a critical mass of interest. So that's the last piece of what we'll do with the candidates before you have an informal time to chat with them. So no booing, cheering, hopping up and down. The cell phones are already silenced. So the sequence is that we are going to give the candidates a minute to 2 minutes just to introduce themselves. This is their story, whatever they want to say to you about themselves, because you're not just voting for a candidate, you're voting for a person. So this is the person piece of yourself, candidates. And we're going to move from that right into talking about the issues. Each of the candidates presented us with one issue that's of primary interest to them. They'll have 3 minutes to talk about that. Betsy Williams, sitting right here, is our timekeeper. Want to demo those cards? When you have 15 seconds left, that's what you're going to see. And when your time is up, we'll show you the red card. We'll hope that Betsy doesn't get so involved in what you're saying she forgets to look at her clock. I'm going to give you a tip about microphones. Don't hold them like an ice cream cone. We can't hear you. Hold them like a trumpet. Okay? They're all on, and we are live streaming. Okay, so this will be available on YouTube. So I think that's everything I wanted to mention to you. And so let's get into the first piece, which is your personal stories. And we're going to start down there at the far end with Allison. Go for it, Allison.
Like a trumpet, huh? Is this okay? All right, so I'm Allison Hepler. I sort of apologize for my rubber boots. It was raining when I left my house this morning, and so I also have a raincoat. So I live in Woolwich, and I've lived there for almost 40 years, but I actually wanted to talk about a project that I've been involved in for the last oh God, probably 20 years. And it is building the boat Virginia. It's the boat that's in downtown Bath on the Kennebec River. And we and a couple of volunteers who are here tonight, but probably about 200 volunteers built this boat over the we laid the keel in 2011, and we have been working on it ever since in downtown Bath through COVID, and we launched her. It turned out to be this wonderful community event, and that was something that surprised me, and that it started out, a bunch of us wanted to build a wooden boat. And it wasn't until the last couple of years that I realized that the city of Bath really saw this as something that was important to their community, and it took on a different meaning. And then actually seeing 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people come for the launch was just great. So that's who I am.
I don't have anything quite as exciting or as much fun. I'm a Navy brat, came to Maine when I was 11. Firm promises from my naval father who said, oh, promise, promise, we are going back to Pennsylvania. Clearly that never happened. My mother was appalled because back in the 60s, actually I believe it was 1960, she could not find Bath, Maine on a map. So not to insult those who live in and love Bath as I do now, she was certain she was going to the ends of the earth and there would be nothing for her to do and no pleasures whatsoever. So I was actually pleased that my dad settled us on Orr's Island. We remained there, obviously, when he retired. We did not go back to Pennsylvania. Never went back, as a matter of fact. So I've been here since I was 11, minus a few years when I went to Wisconsin and was a bank officer. But there's a specialty to Maine that no place else has. Having been Navy brat, we've traveled and we've seen and we've met and we've done. There is nothing. The old adage, there's no place like home. Let me be home.
Thank you, Linda. Would you each remember to say your name when you first... I don't know if we can all read these signs on the front.
I have a sign, but it's Linda Baker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Yauk with a J. And I live in Topsham, but I grew up here in Brunswick. And I am kind of new to the political scene, so I will just tell you a little bit about myself real quick. I tell everybody I'm a parent, I'm a veteran, and I'm a volunteer. I have a 7-year-old who's in 2nd grade. I have a 4-year-old who's in pre-K. I am an Army veteran. I was an interrogator in the Army, so I like to ask a lot of questions. And I am an active community volunteer. I'm on the Friends of Williams Cone, which is the school my children attend. I'm on the playground committee there. I'm on the Friends of the Topsham Public Library. It's my second home. My husband's actually the vice president of the Friends of the Library. And I'm also on the Topsham Board of Appeals, and I'm currently the Saginaw County Treasurer. And when I'm not doing all of those things, I'm finishing up my master's degree right now in statistics. So I'm a numbers and data-driven person. And people always say, Becky, you're very busy. And I say, well, if you want something done, you ask a busy person. So I'm excited to be here tonight and to meet all of you, and thank you for your time.
My name's Orion Breen. I have hippie parents. I was born at home, and my dad looked up at the stars, and there was the constellation Orion. Born and raised in central Maine, St. Albans. My parents met in Haight-Ashbury in the 60s and did the Back to the Land movement, and they thought everybody would leave the city and come to the country and come to places like Maine. And they were right. They were just a couple decades early. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the challenges and opportunities this influx of people has for the state. So I grew up in rural Maine, and my friends listened to country music and watched NASCAR, and hippie parents, we listened to Buffalo Springfield. So it's a same kind of vibe. I've lived across the state in Bangor. I helped found the Buy Local Bangor campaign inspired by Portland, and I lived in Noblesboro, and I've lived in Brunswick and Pownell and Durham, so I've been here for the past 10 plus years, and I love that, you You can have trees in your backyard like when I grew up, and you can also drive a couple minutes and have some nice Indian food and have great art and culture, and this is just the best place in the world to me. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't need, let's keep the microphone at that end. For some reason, they have one for the four of them, but you folks down here have two. So go ahead.
Perfect. Cheryl and I get to share. Good evening, everyone. I'm Maddie Daughtry, and I'm excited to be here at UUCB, my church, which I wish I got to spend more time in, but with the election, I'm glad to find any excuse to be in this amazing building and with all of you. I was born and raised in Brunswick, and I actually come from a family that goes all the way back to the founding of Orrs and Bailey Island. And I'm a proud member of the Brunswick High School class of 2005. I went to Smith College in 2009, and then the economy decided to fall off a cliff, and I worked as hard as I could to try to be able to come back home. When I was 25 years old, I announced that I wanted to run for the State House, and I was lucky enough to get elected because I realized for young people in Maine, there was just so much at stake. And if we wanted to be able to have a future and to actually be able to not only afford to live, to be here and work here, that we had to have young voices in the legislature. And somehow, I'm still not sure how, but a decade has gone by. I'm starting to see a few gray hairs, so I think time is definitely flying by. And in 2020, I like to joke some people got a pandemic puppy. All of you got a pandemic senator. So I'm really excited to be here back in person and getting to actually do things like this and have a wonderful forum in person and not on the Brady Bunch version of Zoom squares. In the state Senate, I've been really honored to be elected by my colleagues to be the Assistant Senate Majority Leader, which actually makes me one of the youngest female Senate leaders in the nation, and also, I think, the youngest female whip that Maine has had, which is an amazing honor. In my other life, and actually where I ran straight from, I own a small business in downtown Brunswick. I run Moderation Brewing, and that's my life outside of the legislature.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Golick. Thank you all for being here today. I've grown up in this district. I actually was born right where the cinema is in Cook's Corner. So I've lived in the district that I'm running for, House District 99, my entire life. And, you know, I come from generational poverty, but I'm fortunate to no longer be there. I'm also one of the founders of the Vicarage by the Sea in Harpswell. So I've been an advocate for our older population for the past 25 years, as well as a local employer. And I have 4 children. I have 2 adult children who graduated from Mount Airy High School, and I have 2 young daughters still at home. And, you know, my goal of running is because, one, I really love the community that I live in. There's not a bigger reason than that. I want to be able to give back to the community that has given me and my family so much. And now that Jay McCrate is terming out of office, there's a seat open, and I'm hoping to fill it and bring new voices to the table. I've never held an office position. I've done a lot of advocacy work in Augusta, mostly on poverty-related issues. But through that, I was appointed by the Speaker of the House about a year ago to the Housing and Zoning Commission. So I got some understanding on how to navigate the halls of Augusta. And that's pretty much me. And thank you again.
Hello. Hello. The last time I used one of these, it was turned off, and I didn't realize it. So I'd like to start by saying good evening and thanking our host, the UU Church of Brunswick, our moderator, and all who have worked. And I know a number of people have worked very hard to make tonight's forum possible. Thank you as well to all of you who are participating tonight, either in person or via live streaming. And then I want to share a fun fact. I thought this was going to be more formal because the only other forums I have ever participated on, as this is the end of my very first term, and I ran in 2020, so I ran during COVID time, were over Zoom. And on Zoom, at least I had to prepare everything in writing, or I'd get totally lost. I'd come across as a buffoon, and no one would vote for me. So I would write everything out, I'd stick to my script, and so I assumed I'd have to do that tonight. And what I'm seeing is that it's very different in person. It is we can read one another, we can connect with one another. So I'm not going to read from my sheet for my introduction, and what I'm going to say is, I want to share a fun fact. I'm a Democrat. I grew up in Auburn, which is about 30 minutes from here. And I've been involved with the Democratic Party here in town for a number of years, and one of the things we do that we all love doing is the Martin Luther King dinner, and it's done right here. It's done in this hall. It's a great big spaghetti feed. Everybody from the community is welcomed in, and 100% of the proceeds go to the Mid-Coast Hunger Prevention Project. So it's a wonderful thing. And I can just see it now. I have not been in this room since then, and I can see the tables, and I can see the conversation. I can see the people being community with one another. And that's really what my being a legislator is all about, being community with one another. So welcome, and I think we're going to have a great time tonight. Oh, I am Poppy Arford.
That's my friend Poppy. Thank you, friend. Hi, everybody. My name is Melanie Sachs. I live in Freeport, Maine. I have 2 grown children. And if you have lived in Freeport, I was the executive director of Freeport Community Services. I was the Cub Master and then Scout leader for both Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and very involved in local arts. So if you are of a certain size during a certain time in Freeport, you might look at your mom and say, hey, there's the crazy food lady, because I would do food drives all of the time. I also was known to that same set for being the slightly wacky fairy godmother with a Cockney accent during a particularly fun episode play of Cinderella for some time. So absolutely adore my community. So grateful to be here with all of you today and looking forward to this evening. Thanks.
You could see there was an instinct. Melanie was going to hand the mic on to me. I'm not a candidate. So for the next piece, we asked each of our candidates to respond to a request to tell us what's their primary issue. And interestingly, we have 8 different primary issues. So this time we're going to go in the opposite direction. Melanie's going to start. And Melanie, I understand you want to talk to us about taxes.
I do.
So you're all going to be held to your 3 minutes. And again, Betsy's doing a great job of watching her clock. She's onto it. So go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I serve on the Taxation Committee, on the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee, and I'm also on the Maine Climate Council Building Infrastructure and Housing Group for the Maine Won't Wait Climate Council. All of those things actually do intersect. Also, I'm a clinical social worker, and I served on my town council for 6 years. I was the chair and vice chair as well. So all of that to say, it is a pleasure, and yes, I'm going to say pleasure and taxation committee on the same sentence. And the reason I do that is there's a lot of good that you can do on the taxation committee, and we did that in the last few years. So I wanted to use my few minutes with you to say, number one, if you haven't filed taxes, which many people don't have to if they're of a certain age or perhaps on disability, please file your taxes by October 31st. And if you have not done so, talk to one of us and we'll help find the place where you can file your taxes, because if you did not get your $850 relief check and you're under a certain income, then you can only do that by filing your taxes. So I took this opportunity for my constituents in the last few years to say, hey, let's do a tax tune-up. Because if you haven't done it, like my parents hadn't for many years, they were missing out on things like the property tax fairness credit, which we expanded in this last session to cover more people to get more of your taxes back. We're funding municipal revenue sharing, which as a town councilor was really important to me, which is really important to you all because it's the money the state gives back to each and every town, lifting all boats to make sure that the pressure on property taxes gets lifted just that little bit. And it is critically important because under a former administration, they didn't even tell us and they shut down the government and we had to put together a budget without it. Under this administration, 5% back to every single municipality. That is incredibly important for your property tax bill. Under the Homestead Exemption, we expanded that. If you don't know what that is, it exempts $25,000 off your income that you don't have to pay taxes on. But also, in this administration, we refunded gradually up to 100% of the revenue lost by your municipality. So if you live in Topsham or Freeport or Brunswick or Harpswell or any place else, well, am I forgetting Pownell and everybody else, that you get that money, that's money that's taken off the pressure for your town because the state is now covering their fair share. These are all incredibly important. We had senior tax programs, we had veterans tax programs, we had exempting the tax on menstrual products. Very important. That is not a luxury. So come talk to me about taxes because it's really fun. Thanks.
I love somebody who can smile and sound so upbeat talking about taxes. We're going to move on to Poppy, Ms. Arford, and her issue is affordable health care.
I just have to say that I had told Melanie, who I have a great deal of respect for, that if anybody could make taxes sound like fun, then she would be able to do it. So I think she's done a great job. No cheering. Oh, no cheering. Sorry about that. So anyhow, again, good evening. I want to thank again our host, our helpers, our moderator, and everybody who's joining us tonight in person and via live streaming. And I am going to read a bit from my text because I'm providing some facts which I have no ability to remember without the paper. So when we were asked about which topic we would like to comment on, I struggled to decide healthcare or housing. Healthcare or homelessness, a component of housing, very important. As addressing both are critically important to me. I see our neighbors experiencing homelessness as facing an extremely challenging cold weather season. We must collectively do all we can to help people in need find safe and warm housing this winter. Yet, I chose affordable health care to address, as this is the area I have advocated passionately for, starting with my husband's cancer in 2008. And I am currently serving on the Healthcare Insurance and Financial Services Committee to continue that work. As healthcare is my chosen topic, I will jump in by offering my observation on what has worked to make healthcare more affordable for Maine people over the past 2 years, my first term. My first and most important observation is this: the primary mechanism that is acting to make healthcare, individual and small group insurance plans, which is what the state of Maine regulates, more affordable, are the new insurance premium subsidies funded by the federal government. This is a good thing, as more people can afford insurance, yet also a troubling matter, as the government is, in effect, subsidizing with our tax dollars the private insurance industry and their profits. These new subsidy programs include the following, in case any of you are in a position to take advantage of them. Enhanced premium tax credits offered on CoverMeGov, Maine's state-run marketplace for individual insurance plans. This year, more than 66,000 Maine people signed up for coverage, and up to 80% are receiving savings through the enhanced premium tax credits. The subsidized premiums will be offered through 2025 as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. The second one is Small Business Health Insurance Premium Support Program, which provides premium payment relief to Maine businesses enrolled in small group health insurance plans, which cover 50 businesses with 50 or fewer employees. The initial credit amounts are expected to be $50 per adult, plus an additional $30 for plans that include a child. They will be offered through April of 2023. And finally, the Biden administration just passed a final rule extending eligibility for enrollment in CoverMeGov Marketplace. And I need to just tie it up here and tell you that as both these subsidies are targeted to end by 2026, we're going to need to work very hard in the legislature to find sustainable pathways forward for affordable, and I will be working on this with a focus on universal, publicly funded healthcare insurance for all Maine people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Cheryl Ann Golek is talking with us tonight about the housing crisis. Go ahead, Cheryl Ann.
Well, we have a few crises facing our state today, but I think housing crisis is one of our top issues, as the lack of housing has ripple effects on many things. I have personally experienced homelessness. I know what it feels like as a young parent to search for affordable housing and have no options, or be denied access to the existing options that we have. I have seen my family members, friends, and neighbors struggle with housing. Now I'm an employer and part of a state that is increasingly unaffordable. We pushed people to live further and further from good jobs, opportunities, and services. The cost of rental housing has risen rapidly in our state. In 2019, rents rose 23.9% in just 1 year, and housing costs have continued to grow since then. More than 1 in 5 renters in our state currently pays more than half their income towards rental costs. About 26,000 people are now on housing wait lists in our state. And to add to the effect, studies have shown that the lack of affordable housing creates physical harm. Children's Health Watch found that unstable housing among families with children will cost the U.S. $111 billion in avoidable health and education expenditures over the next 10 years. By investing in affordable housing, we can reduce what we are currently spending on adverse effects created by the lack and quality of affordable housing. The lack of affordable housing hurts our local businesses and our economy. There is a direct link between our housing crisis and our state's worker shortage. The housing shortage affects employee recruitment, productivity, and retention. People have to be able to afford to live in the areas that they work. Creating affordable housing helps us all. It helps those who need housing. It significantly improves people's overall health. It supports local businesses. It helps the local government. It gives people better options for employment and education and much more. We must make housing policy have equitable outcomes that address the history of discrimination and segregated housing that hurts poor communities, our economy, and all of us. Thank you.
Those are very sobering facts. Thank you, Ms. Golek. And Ms. Daughtry is talking about paid family leave. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me all right? So imagine you're sick and you're trying to decide whether you stay home or miss a day of work, and you're really concerned about what that's going to mean for you financially. Maybe you have a loved one who's taken ill and you're trying to figure out how to be able to care for them as well as be able to care for yourself. Maybe it's something exciting like the birth or adoption of a child or a new family member, or maybe it's something like dealing with a terminal diagnosis. These are all various situations that people face where they could be benefiting from paid family medical leave. And the pandemic actually, I think, really shined a clear light on the need for paid family medical leave, as we saw everyone trying to do everything from reinventing themselves back home, trying to be school teachers, trying to be able to be a full-time restaurant for their loved ones. We all saw and recognized that we have lives, and paid family medical leave is something we need. The United States is one of the only developed countries in the world that does not have a paid family medical leave system. And as we like to say in Maine, as Maine goes, so goes the nation. We can't afford to wait for for politicians in DC to write a plan that might not work for us. What I'm really excited about is this is something I've been working on for since I was 25. And I've introduced several different versions of paid family medical leave, from an opt-in system to a universal system. And finally, I realized what we really needed to do was write our own program that works for Mainers. So I was really pleased we passed a bill this last session with bipartisan support to create the Maine Commission, and we are literally working, Democrats and Republicans and independents, to come up with a program for Maine, written by Mainers, to work for all of us. This would be a huge program for us. In 2018, a study saw that 56.9% of Maine employees work with what is deemed a small business, and yet 99% of all businesses in Maine are small businesses. Most places, myself included, in my small business, can't afford to offer a paid family medical leave program. But if it were one that was created to be universal, it'd be something that would be affordable for everyone. It not only is good for employees, and 85% of folks don't have access to this type of service nationally, it also helps employers. I've lost employees who are looking for, full-time benefits, and I'm not the only one locally who's a small employer who's faced the same thing. Some studies have shown that having paid family medical leave can reduce employee turnover by over 50%. Also, it's really, really important for children and families. So many studies show that it's absolutely transformational for the young folks in our society to be able to have time with their parents. So from all ages, from birth to the end, this is a policy that would make a difference for every single one of us.
Thank you, Ms. Daughtry. You can hang on to that microphone. And Mr. Breen, you have given us the issue of humility, collaboration, and support for small business. This is a man who was born under the stars and is shooting for the stars. So.
Well, it's funny. My namesake, Orion in Greek mythology, he wasn't a very humble guy. And I think a lot of people would say I'm not very humble either. But I do know that I don't have all the answers. And I think you have to go through life and treat other people that way, that their perspective needs to be respected. And everybody has something to teach you if you listen. And it really is about listening and respect. If you want people to listen to you and respect you and love you, you have to give those things to other people. We've been knocking on a lot of doors, and Becky here is the door-knocking queen. If you live in Topsham, you've probably got a door knock from her. I'm running District 98 is Durham and Pownell and a slice of Lisbon, Topsham, and Bowdoin. So I got, some of the best doors are actually the doors of the people who they don't agree with you. Those are some of the most exciting, interesting, and can be thoughtful conversations. One woman reached out to me, and she started her message to me, like, I'm a Trumpster, and, you can call me deplorable if you want to. And, and she listed off a bunch of things that she was passionate about, and I definitely probably am not going to vote the way that she would want me to vote on some of those issues. But, my response to her was, I really dislike that kind of political language, calling people names, calling people deplorable if you disagree with them. We need to be able to have conversations, thoughtful conversations about things we're passionate about that we disagree on without attacking each other or people walking away feeling attacked or shamed or anything like that. And just me expressing that, and that, I have friends and family, they agree with you on certain these issues, I respect them, I don't want them to feel shamed, I don't want them to, to feel attacked because, if we all come together on Thanksgiving dinner, we don't. This is all of our Maine. We all have to work together. And Maine has a great track record of working together. We don't judge books by its cover. I'm on the board of the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce, and the issues that the business people in the community and the Maine State Chamber and the Portland Regional Chamber say they care about, taxes is not at the top of the list. They're talking about we need workforce education, we need affordable housing, we need health insurance to be more affordable. I could go on, but I'm up. But because everybody agrees on these things, it's going to be messy, it's going to take tough conversations, but we're going to make an impact, and I think we're going to solve these. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now Ms. Yauk, Rebecca Yauk, is going to talk with us about climate change.
Yes, thank you. Climate change is my topic. So when my interest in the environment and in climate change started here in Brunswick in 5th grade. Maine used to have this program called the Maine Energy Education Program, MEEP. And when I was in 5th grade, back in 1991, there was a statewide essay contest where you could write about what your family did to help the environment. And back then you couldn't recycle milk jugs, and my family used them in every way you could possibly imagine. And I wrote this essay about it. And my essay was one of the ones that was chosen, and I got to go to the State House and meet my legislators and hear about what the state was doing to address the issues that we were seeing in our environment at that time. And I gotta say, we've come a long way in the last 30 years. It's fantastic what the state is doing. As I mentioned earlier, I am getting my master's in statistics. I do all of my data analysis projects on climate data, and specifically water is my interest. As I'm sure all of you know, the Gulf of Maine is warming up faster than almost anywhere else in the world. When water warms up, it expands, which means we also feel sea level rise more intensely than we do almost anywhere else in the world. I'm not saying that Brunswick's going to be underwater, but what that means is that we have more flooding events. And right now, if you drive north on Route 1, right by the Taste of Maine, they're raising the road there because it just floods too often now. We need to make sure that we are being proactive in our adaptation to what is going on in our environment. Maine has been leading the way in a lot of areas of this issue. We have the Climate Council, we have the Climate Corps. We joined the RGGI in 2007, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We were hoping for a federal cap and trade, and that didn't happen. So New England came together and said, we'll do it ourselves. And we've led the way on that. So if I'm elected, I want to make sure that we keep prioritizing our response to climate change so that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren have a really great place to grow up and live, just like each one of us did. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yauk. We're very grateful to Ms. Baker, who's our one Republican as it happens here tonight. So you are talking, I understand, about education?
I am, thank you. And I am your token Republican. Please don't beat me up. I don't know that I can begin to explain my issues with education or my passion for doing something about education in just 3 minutes. I surely will try. The first thing I think we've lost is civility. Unfortunately, I think we have to teach civility at this point. I feel, I hope I'm wrong, but I feel that we have taught our youth to be rude and unkind and insensitive, and I think we do need to start there. Barring that, I also think that COVID has had a huge impact on our students with special needs, whether that is pre-K or grade 12. The issues have been exacerbated. Parents are not trained to be counselors. They are not trained to be teachers. They are not trained to be a whole bunch of things they were thrown into in the last couple of years. So in terms of education, we need to address parents as well as students. In this area, there has been a decrease in alternative education options for students, and I think we need to take a very serious look at that. Whether it's funding, whether it's board approval, whether it's availability of buildings. I'm sorry, but all those things really don't matter to me. Fix it, work it out. The most important thing in our world is our children, our youth. We need to pay attention to what they are learning, what they are doing. I don't see us paying enough attention. I think that the behavior, the emotional needs, the social needs need special addressing at this point, largely because of COVID, but also because of the climate that we as adults have created for our students. I'm not sure how to do it universally, but in Maine, I would certainly like to see us make available more counselors for both parents and students. I would like to see that available in school as well as out of school. So in-home visits, I think, can give you untold information. I think it can help parents and students. I think parents need to have more input. Who knows your child better than you do? No one. So give parents the opportunity. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's contentious. We all have to learn to live with some of that, and we all need to give and we all need to take. It comes back to civility. It comes back to youth. Nothing is more important in this world, and particularly in Maine, than our youth and what we are teaching them and what we are giving them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baker. Meaningful words. For sure. And Ms. Hepler, who's talking about bottle redemption.
So I thought it would be useful to talk about how I approach an issue, because I don't have all this, the correct, so necessarily the correct solution here. But we all know, if we live in this area, about the bottle redemption crisis that we suffered, especially over the summer. I first became aware of it in July when the Georgetown transfer station head called me and said he was overwhelmed with bottles and cans that people dropped off to be donated to the town. I went down to the transfer station, and then within a week I heard from other towns in my district. I heard from the wife of one of my fellow select board members. I heard from a Rotary guy, and I knew I was just getting too many phone calls, as many of you were as well. So you all know how it works, right? The simple thing is you pay a nickel or a dime or 15 cents if it's wine, and you get it back when you redeem those bottles, either at a redemption center, at a clink center, at Shaw's when you shove it through a reverse vending machine. Then I called DEP. There was one guy in charge of bottle redemption. And I learned about, that many centers had closed in this area. A number of reasons. One is high rent, that these buildings people were raising, the owners of the buildings were raising rents beyond what the redemption center people could afford. There's a fixed price in statute, and that was making it impossible to pay labor costs and the rent. There was also time spent counting and sorting, if you've spent any time in one of these redemption centers. Also, I learned the combination of the heat wave, which means more drinks, and tourism is back as in a couple of years after the pandemic. I also took a field trip to the Clink facility in Oakland, and in a couple of weeks going to be going down to Portland to the Tomra Center. They're the ones that do the reverse vending machines that we see at Shaw's supermarkets. Just so you know, the counting and the sorting, and some of you may already know this, is so that the companies that produce these materials know how much is due back to them in terms of plastic or aluminum or whatever, or glass. And then it's also to reimburse the redemption centers for the nickel that they have paid you back, right? And they also pay the redemption centers 4.5 cents, in addition to the 5 cents for the processing fee. And the material has higher value than the regular recycling stuff, because it's considered clean. It doesn't always look clean to me, but it is considered clean. And also people have supported the program. There are many possibilities for raising the processing fee, maybe tying it to COLA, raising the nickel to 10 cents, reduce counting, reduce sorting. Are there possible ways of reducing the counting? Maybe you extrapolate, you count some and you extrapolate that so that everybody knows what's doing. Maybe use sales. Anyway, I look forward to working with my colleagues and advocates on solving this complicated problem. I guess what I learned is that nothing is simple.
I must say, I'm totally impressed with the passion up here, aren't you? I think we should give them a round of applause. Just I already feel better tonight than I might have been. So I'm going to give 1 minute for any of you who are still writing out a question based upon, you've now heard more from each of the candidates than you knew when you came in. And Donna Chale, up back. Donna, if you can pick up one of the baskets. If you have a card that you've written out, would you just raise it so that Donna can get it into the basket and we can include it? That's a good idea. We've got one. Bill, did you have one? Did you have one? Yes, right there. Okay, so let me outline the ground rules for how this will go. Again, this is not a debate, but we do want to give you a chance to enunciate a little more about any of the issues that you care to. So I'm going to pose the question to you rather than the audience, because sometimes folks get adversarial in their questioning. We do that. And any of you may respond. Please raise your hand and wait for me to identify you. And then we're going to give you a minute to respond. More than one of you can respond to each question, but we're not going to belabor them. I'm going to move along to the next question so that we can have time for as many as possible. And our team did do some sorting to see if we can find a sort of questions or issues that had kind of a critical mass of interest behind them. So the first one has to do with education and childcare. The town mentioned is Brunswick. How would you support early childhood education and our state's need for childcare? Does anyone want to try that? Ms. Daughtry and then Mr. Breen.
Thank you. So I've been lucky enough to serve on the Education Committee in the State House, and this is something that we have been working on since I was first elected. We have a multi-prong issue with this. First off, a lot of our childcare workers are some of the most low-paid individuals in the education world, and honestly, that's, it's really hard to recruit folks, and we need to be paying them for their expertise and the crucial service they provide. We also need physical space. We need to make sure that we are providing age-appropriate spaces, and we need to be investing in those. The Speaker of the House, Speaker Fecteau, actually had 2 bills providing grants to daycare centers to be able to expand, and the need is so dire, the program got used up like that. And I think that's a loud and clear thing that we need to keep doing that. We also, I think, like Linda said, we need to just remove all the barriers and say that this is something we need to do. My fun factoid I always like to say is someone of child-rearing age who hopes to have children of her own pretty soon. In our own line in Augusta, there isn't even a child care facility for legislators. We end up taking care of a lot of the kids right there in the legislature, which I love, but we need to do more.
That paints quite a picture, doesn't it? Mr. Breen, you wanted to respond to this as well? We have battling microphones.
Yes, Maddie's absolutely right. I mean, and I'd like to thank her for the work she's been doing on this. We have this time now where businesses are now saying the same thing that families and nonprofits and people in the Democratic Party as well as Republican Party have been saying. We can't run businesses if we don't have people who show up to work. And people can't show up to work if they don't have child care and elder care. It's as simple as that. So while it's going to take investment of money, it's not spending money, it's investing money. It's going to help the economy, it's going to help our long-term future, it's going to help with civility of our kids, and it's going to help parents out, and it's going to help businesses out. And we're going to get it done because we have businesses, nonprofits, families all saying we need to get it done. And Mainers work together no matter what, they're Democrat, Republican, Independent.
I'm going to, we're a little ahead of schedule, so let's allow 2 minutes. I'm looking at Betsy. We're kind of making you run awful short here on the 1 minute response. Yeah, we'll give you 2 minutes for any of these questions. I'm going to move along to the next one, which has to do with healthcare, the questions from someone in Topsham. What initiatives would you take, if elected, to improve the health and well-being of the Maine population? Who would like to take that? Yes, Ms. Arford.
I'm going to let someone else go first since I've already spoken.
Okay. Yeah, were you spoken on health, affordable health care? Yes, Ms. Baker.
Thank you. I think one of the important things about healthcare is we talk about access, we talk about cost. What I hear often is the inability to physically access it. I have knocked on doors where people are actually saying, I would go to the doctors more if I could get there. The lack of public transportation, the lack of access to affordable transportation, I don't know because I don't use them, but what I do hear is that the taxi services are probably as reasonable as they can be, so perhaps some of that needs to be subsidized. I do hear people say, I would like to go to a specialist, how do I get there? With all the cutbacks, I think it's very important to take a look at, yes, access we think of as being there and being available, but how people actually physically get there, I'm hearing is very real.
Yes, Ms. Sachs.
Thank you. You can call me Melanie if you want.
Okay. We read up on how to do this, and they said Ms. and Mr., but,
Gotcha.
We're kind of informal here, so.
Feel free. So I just wanted to highlight some of the work that we did do. Number one, legislature funded free breakfast and lunch for every single child, K through 12. That's a really important component of health. Number two, one of my bills is school-based health centers, which is one of the most effective models for health and behavioral health for teenagers in particular, because it's a health center that's attached to the school. Brunswick just applied and has one under this new expansion under the bill that I passed. We've gone from 16 to 21. I would love to see one in every single school here in our state. And the other pieces that we did is lowered the cost of prescription drugs. We had several bills that did that as well. So from birth, as Maddie says, till the end, this legislature has tried really hard to continue to do things like expand dental health access. I testified for that bill as well. So making sure that we're hitting every single point until, as Poppy says, we can get health care for all. We will continue to push those barriers to make sure that health care is accessible in really concrete ways.
Okay, Poppy.
So one of the things, and other people have touched on this, is workforce. A lack of people, enough people in almost every profession in our state showing up to provide the services that are required to meet the population in our state. And our workforce, our provider healthcare workforce, we have taken a huge hit in that, especially in the jobs that are not as well paying, our direct service providers and our CNA and some of our nursing positions. And one of the things we have started to do is to provide subsidies through grants and through scholarships for various healthcare professions to encourage people to go into these professions and come out the other side to live and work in Maine. Because we all know how incredibly expensive higher education is right now. And one of the things I'd like, first of all, I think we need to absolutely continue to do that and do it with equity across the line. I know that the social work profession right now is gearing up to put in a bill for their own loan program for social workers. But what I'd like to see us do a little bit more of is tie the grants and the scholarships into some sort of performance requirement that they would have to stay.
I think we have a battery issue. We're going to give you a new mic.
Anyhow, I'll say this quickly, so that they would be required and incented to stay in Maine for at least 5 years after they graduate. Some of the programs have that, some of them don't. And one example is I was at my dentist this week and was talking to him about whether or not he had taken any Maine Care patients, because Maine Care now is fully funding dental services for everyone, which is amazing. However, very few, if any, dentists in our area are accepting Maine Care patients. And one of the reasons it's not just payment, it's also they've shut their practices because they can't get enough dental hygienists. And he just said, the fact he gave me was, of the 60 dental hygienists that had graduated from UNA this year, only five of 50, it was actually 50, stayed in the state of Maine. Now that's a problem, and that's something we can do something about.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to this housing question. And in response to the question, what town are you from, this person wrote, Habitat for Humanity, Brunswick, Harpswell, Sagadahoc, and Lincoln counties. The question is, how will you address the issue of housing, the reduced availability and the higher prices? We've said a little about this, but would anyone like to add? We've already heard from you, Orion. I think I'm going to ask Cheryl. Certainly. How will you address the issue of housing, reduced availability, and higher prices? Cheryl.
Well, you know, one of the problems is we have this incredible voucher program. It's called Section 8 housing. I wouldn't be where I am today without it. But people wait for years to get it. I have an intellectually handicapped brother in this town. He waited over 5 years to get a Section 8 housing voucher. Then you have 90 days to secure housing. And if you don't secure it, you lose it. So it's no mandate that you have to take it. So 30 years ago, having Section 8 housing voucher, single mother with 2 young children. I can't tell you how many times I was told more than 30 years ago, I'm sorry, we don't rent to you people. The discrimination in the program is blatant up front. Legally, it's not allowed, but it's there. It's right in front of everybody. They don't have to take it. I would fully support a percentage, just as an example. Say you own 30 apartment buildings or more. You should have to make 20% of them income-based and voucher approved. Because we know the Section 8 housing voucher being in effect for about 40 years. They're not taking it. You have 40 families, the last I read, I think it was a month ago, at the Tedford Housing Shelter that can't find housing because nobody will accept the housing voucher. It's a good program because people can climb out of poverty with it. You know, you make a little more money, you pay a little more rent. The rugs aren't ripped right out from underneath you. And I'm not saying landlords and housing don't need incentives. But I think our towns and our state can pull something together, and I think we could watch thousands of people be housed with the housing, a lot of the housing that we have now in existence. Thank you.
Yes, Rebecca.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'm going to add, I think that there are probably creative ways that the state legislature can incentivize municipalities to increase their future housing projects, as whether that's neighborhoods of single-family homes, whether that's apartment buildings. And I'm hopeful that as we go forward with new construction of neighborhoods, that we're mindful in perhaps putting childcare centers in the center of those to help with our young families that need childcare. I'd also like to see the state give towns more direction and more guidelines on, for instance, the ADU law that was recently passed, because going to the doors, I've heard that this is a concern. And I sit on the Topsham Board of Appeals, and we actually just heard an appeal recently of someone who wanted to build a second dwelling, and they can't in Topsham because our town ordinances have not caught up to the state ones. And so I think the state needs to just give more assistance to municipalities to help them update their ordinances, get them to a point where they can very clearly say, okay, we can reduce our lot sizes to allow for accessory dwellings to be built on there. That will also give, potential rental income to people who own that property. There's a lot of different things we need to do. I think we just need to be creative about it.
Yes, go ahead, Orion.
I'll let Maddie go first.
Thank you, Ren. I just wanted to add that I've been really lucky to be the chair of the Labor and Housing Committee for the last session, and got to see the bill that Becky was talking about, LD 2003 from Speaker Fecto. And it's an attempt to try to really answer a lot of the housing problems that we're facing and really deal with the zoning. But the other portion that we're facing is we can pass every bill in the world, but we are going to have a very real problem when it comes to supply and demand, the cost of labor. We're dealing with the economic reality where the cost of mortgages are going to be rising, which is going to make it even more attainable for most Maine families. And the other thing that I keep coming back to is I grew up on housing building sites. My dad designed houses, and my first jobs was, getting to help out on a job site. We need to make sure that we're training the next generation of people to be able to design and build those houses. I'm endlessly grateful all the time that my father taught me to do, basic carpentry and a little bit of, plumbing, because it has saved me so many times when I can't find someone to be able to come and help. So I've done a lot of work on career and technical education, and we're doing increased investment in that. There's some wonderful programs actually locally that are trying to incentivize women to look at the trades. They're really, really great. They're going into the schools and trying to get people to start thinking about that and what a great living it can be. And so we have to be doing everything from looking at zoning, for making sure that we have permissive language, that we're doing everything that I think all of us here would agree on. Because the reality is that I always tell folks, in the new Senate District 23, which I'm running for, the median house price is roughly around $600,000. At 35 years old, this is the area I love. I'm so glad to be here. If I hadn't been fortunate enough to get my home when I did, I literally couldn't afford to live in this area. And it is such a crisis that many of my friends are having to live hours away. I have friends who are out of state who desperately, like Becky, wanted to come home, and she was lucky enough to come to our community. But it's a failure for all ages, and we have a lot to do.
Thank you. Probably many of us couldn't afford to live the houses that we're living in there. We'll have one more response,
All right.
Orion, and then I'm
Sure.
going to move to the next question.
So the housing bill that passed, that was just mentioned, it does have funds to go to towns to help them navigate this. The housing bill, to me, no bill is perfect, but what I think is amazing about it is you had Maine People's Alliance Progressive Activist Group, Maine Conservation Voters Environmental Group, Maine State Chamber of Commerce Business Group, all agreeing we need this bill. That's how we get things done. We had a commission, bipartisan, they identified these issues, they passed a bill. There's more work to be done, but all these groups come together and they're saying, this is an issue, we can solve it. It is supply and demand, we need to build more. We need every town to have a growth zone. This isn't a scary zone. Yes, preserve your rural areas and farms and land for that, but have a growth zone. I was involved in the Maine Council of Aging, and we talked about age-friendly communities. And what makes a community friendly for seniors is the same thing that makes a community friendly for families. You have housing that's affordable, that's denser in certain neighborhoods. You can walk and get a bite to eat. You can walk and go to a small business. There may be a library or the school nearby. And all this stuff is tied together. We can solve these. We're talking about transportation, access to healthcare, talking about school-based health centers. There's the community school models. We need to recognize that our schools are our most important assets in the community, and they're not just centers of learning. We have the school nurses there. They're food pantries. We feed people there. We can have after-school adult education programs there. We have all these buses going through the community. Can they be utilized and help, seniors access the school-based health nurse after 3:30? We need aftercare. Your job goes to 5 o'clock, and the school gets out at 3:30, and your kid gets off the bus. What are you supposed to do? We need to come together as a community and create these community centers. It's going to take investment.
Thank you, Orion. It's wonderful the way the questions from all of you are meshing with the interest areas of our candidates. This is one on climate change. Many of you may have heard that wonderful presentation last week at the Brunswick Library on climate with the Natural Resources Council and the Citizens Climate Lobby. So this is a question, it's a little long. There's a lot of success stories in Maine around climate, but we're still behind on the issue. I'd like to hear the new ideas on how we reach 50% reductions by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Can the legislature get a PPA for the state government's power like they're doing in Pennsylvania? Do you folks know what a PPA is? Okay, we need... Say again? Power purchase agreement. Okay, does someone want to tackle that? We haven't heard anything yet from you, Allison. I'm being way in. I'm just going to give you a chance, but don't feel... no. Sorry.
Do you want to?
No, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
That's all right.
I wanted to make sure you got a chance to talk.
I happen to know what a PPA is.
Okay.
But can you repeat the question again?
Yeah.
'Cause the 50% reduction in fossil fuels, in emissions, what are we talking about?
Okay, it says, I'd like to hear the new ideas on how we reach 50% reductions. I presume it would be fossil fuels. Yeah, and greenhouse gases by 2030 and 100% by 2050. Can the legislature, okay, I got to get a PPA for the state, I think it means before the state government's power, like they're doing in Pennsylvania.
Okay, I'm from Pennsylvania, but I'm not sure I know what they're doing in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
One of the things that actually prompted me to run back in 2016, unsuccessfully, I might add, is solar power and the expansion of solar power and community solar. And that was something that I'm on the Woolwich Select Board, and it was something that I was interested in. We have a capped landfill. Could we use that to allow a community solar farm? Well, there was a cap on the number of people who could invest in that at the time, and so I was interested in doing that. In the meantime, what I did on the Woolwich Select Board was, unbelievably for the town of Woolwich, approve solar panels for the use, for paying for the town's municipal solar, or the town's municipal costs. So it was a couple of buildings, and we put it on land that the town owned, but it wasn't on top of the landfill, and so that got us interested in doing something there. And we did it through a power purchase agreement with Revision Energy, and so we will be owning that in 3 more years. And so I think the expansion, I don't know much about energy. I'm looking at Melanie on this, but one of the things that I have really been impressed by, and I think can make our grid more resilient, and especially as we move more to EV vehicles and things like that, heat pumps and whatnot, is to make sure that we have local grids seem to be making us more resilient. There's less reliance on poles and wires. And if we can find a way, that's maybe not a new idea, but it's an idea that I'm interested in. So.
Yes, go ahead, Melanie.
Thank you. Are we on? Here we go. So I do serve on the Energy, Utilities, and Technology Committee. I also am I'm the only person from Maine to be accepted to what's called the Legislative Energy Horizon Institute. I will be an energy policy planner by the end of this session that I'm doing. So the answer simply is yes, we can get there. We can. How we get there is the biggest question. Because the bulk of our emissions, for example, if we're talking about greenhouse gases, is from transportation. We are a rural state who drives really, really far just to get to the grocery store, especially up north. So how do we decarbonize and reduce our emissions for transportation? The second bucket is housing. We have the oldest housing stock. We rely on fossil fuels here in Maine more than any place else to heat those really old homes. And how do we do this with a just transition to beneficial electrification? You'll hear that a lot. So whether it is looking at our procurement and purchase power agreements, whether it is incentives for electric vehicles in a way that makes sense for those who perhaps wouldn't have chosen an electric vehicle, and do it in a way that is throughout the state, how do we build new housing, but also weatherize the old housing. So yes, we can get there, but it is going to take transparent, thoughtful policy around the impacts of climate. How do we do the grid? And I will not even get into consumer-owned versus investor-owned utilities right now. But all of that is possible, but we have to stay at the table. And my hope is that it becomes more nonpartisan. These are goals we all have for good, solid, resilient electric grid that meets our carbon goals, but it's going to take time.
Thank you very much. Okay, yes, Linda. You're looking wary, but she's going to wade in anyway.
I am. I am. It seems to me that there are lots of options that really are not explored. One of the things that does bother me is that the rebates for the investment in, for instance, solar power, as they did with wind power, are granted, obviously, if you are doing that. So those who can afford to invest in the solar panels are clearly the ones who are getting the rebate. So those people who are the neediest, who have the greatest reward that they would reap from something such as solar panels are not able, they don't have the credit rating to get the loans, to get the panels, to get the rebate. So I would like to see some incentive that helps the underdog, the little guy, the person who does not have either the credit rating or the financial means to go ahead and say, you know, we're going to get this rebate. They aren't going to get it if they don't have the means to get it. But I also worry about what we're doing with those panels. I'm a widow of a firefighter who always said, I can't get an axe through that if there's a house fire.
Rebecca.
I wanted to add to what Linda was saying, because you brought up a good point about making sure that people who need it the most can get an advantage in this instance too. And so I mentioned earlier that Maine is part of the RGGI, and that is cap and trade. And since doing that in 2009, all of the proceeds from that cap and trade program go into programs in the state, such as energy efficiency and the weatherization programs that we have, which are geared exactly towards people who need it the most, who can't afford to do it on their own. So we are doing it, but we definitely need to do more. I agree.
For those of you who want to watch the presentation, the Curtis Memorial Library has a link on their website, a video. It's not the best quality, but the three speakers there were impressive, and there were many positive things that were mentioned about Maine's advances in climate, although there's surely work to be done. So you might want to go on the Curtis Memorial Library website. Also, we have a nephew who's the head of Clean Energy New Hampshire, who looks up to Maine, who's made so much more progress apparently than New Hampshire. So it's useful for the states to help each other to find out what works. I didn't say at the beginning of this, we know that there are more questions that we will probably get to in the time that we have, but I'm going to keep going with these. Did you want to?
I'm just going to add a piece of information.
Mike, yeah.
Yes. The Citizens Climate Lobby was one of the host organizations to the event you're talking about, and we have a local chapter, and everybody we meet by Zoom, and anybody and everybody is welcome to join us. So if you Google Brunswick Community Climate Lobby, you will find us.
Thank you, that's helpful. Okay, we have some...
Excuse me, it's Citizen Climate Lobby. Sorry about that.
Yes, I probably called it the wrong thing. We're going into a couple of different areas now. This is someone from the Brunswick district, and their topic has to do with Indigenous people. What are the issues surrounding Maine's Indigenous citizens, and what are the concerns surrounding sovereignty? Does anyone want to comment on that? Cheryl.
Well, you know, our indigenous populations in the tribe, they need to be able to self-govern themselves. They need to be able to access all the federal laws that every other federal tribe in our entire country can access. They could self-govern up until the Land Claim Act in the 80s was put into effect. And it's just, we need to, as a state, step up and give them the rights that are inherently theirs, that they deserve. There isn't another tribe in our country that can't access the federal programs and stuff besides ours. So, yeah, we need to do something about this.
I think Rebecca also wanted to comment on this.
I just want to say I support tribal sovereignty. I don't know why it hasn't passed, but I would vote for it.
And Maddie.
I just wanted to add, Cheryl really summed up the heart of the issue with the Maine Indian Claims Act, that it makes our tribes an outlier with the nation and the ability to draw down federal resources, which further makes it an inequity for our indigenous populations. I think one of the biggest indicators of this was when we had a bill in front of the legislature this session about dealing with water rights, and that they couldn't, one tribe couldn't access to be able to drill a new well for their school. And this is down east, and I've been to the watershed that they're talking about, and it's an issue for the entire community, not just the indigenous population, that they're not pulling in high enough quality water. Sometimes in the summer they'll turn on the taps and they'll be running brown, but they couldn't, because of the way that the water district was set up, they couldn't get permission to drill a new well on their own land to be able to connect with their new schools. And so it varies from access to water, to the ability to self-govern, to the ability to have, proceeds, to be able to really, be able to govern themselves. I've supported tribal sovereignty since the beginning. It's actually one of the issues over the last, 2 to 4 years that I've gotten more communications from in this district than almost any other issue. And I think, it's a bipartisan issue, and I think we're gonna make big strides on it, but it covers the whole gamut of policy.
Thank you. And Poppy.
I'll just add that having observed what has happened over the last 2 years in this current 130th legislature, and knowing that this community, the Brunswick community, at least in my district, is a huge supporter of tribal sovereignty. They went to Augusta, they wrote letters, they lobbied, they did so much, and were so disappointed when we did not end up with a tribal sovereignty bill passing. And what I have to say about that is what I've heard is that this coming session, we will have something come back. I can't tell you what it is, but there will be something, and it will probably be an effective way to address passing tribal sovereignty by taking it in chunks. This was a huge bill, and my personal take on this is that everybody agreed that it was the right thing to do, to return sovereignty and self-determination to the Wabanaki Nation. However, there was still a great deal of, I did not experience this, but fear and reluctance, because once that's done, we cannot take it back. Once sovereignty becomes law, they have a relationship with the federal government, they no longer have a relationship with us, we no longer govern them. And so we just need to keep working on that, and I truly believe we're going to get there, and I'm going to invite everybody in the room to commit right now to working on this with us, because it is a grave, grave injustice that has gone on for far too long.
Thank you. Okay, this one takes a little different turn, and I'm going to read it to you as it's written, and I think we may paraphrase it too. Right to die. What's your position? I think that's also called death with dignity. Is there another phrase that I'm not remembering? Does anyone want to try responding to this? I think in Maine, death with dignity is a law. Yeah. So we do have access to it. Yes, go ahead, Allison.
Thank you. This is an incredibly difficult decision for anyone to make. I heard from lots of people, this was, I think, the first year I was in the legislature. They're complicated issues. And what I liked about the bill that we passed, and I was glad to vote for it, although it's always, nobody likes to talk about death, right? Is that it's an option. It's not something that you have to do. It's an option. The protections are there. And there are certain things that you can't do. Like you have to see a doctor and another doctor, and there are lots of safeguards in place. And I have to say that even up until the very last minute, and because I know this because I know 2 people who actually took advantage of this year, that the doctor will show up and he will, and it was a he in this case, will say, we can just leave. We can just, don't have to do this just because you've made plans to do this. Your family's here and it's already, you made this decision. We can just change our mind right now. And so I feel like there was a lot of work done on this bill, and there are a lot of protections in place. And I will say that for the 2 cases that I know, it was done with love and with seriousness, and it was an option that was suitable for these 2 folks. So,
Anyone else? Yes, Melanie.
I can just speak to this as I'm a clinical social worker who's worked in hospice. And one of the pieces about that bill, which I support as well, was the discussion for families and loved ones just around the process and being able to communicate with one another for whatever that choice was. It is incredibly difficult to speak about these issues. And so having a vehicle to be able to talk about it, for some people it was that issue, that bill that came up, death with dignity, but it also was, how would you like to spend your last days? And knowing about hospice care as well, because many people don't realize that it was a benefit that they have under Medicare, that they really can access end-of-life care. So speaking about end-of-life, however that looked for you, found it was incredibly important to talk about with patients, as we all would hope to be able to have those conversations with those we care about.
Thank you. We tried to ask all the questions that we could that had a critical mass of people here. In other words, a number of people who have broached that topic to stay within what the whole group is interested in. We do have a few minutes left. I'm also looking at Betsy and others. We might give you a minute to make a closing statement. Should we go ahead with that? Okay, and I'm going to let you go in whatever order you want. Just a closing statement. Anything that you want to say. Linda.
There were just a couple of things I wanted to comment on. One is the affordable housing and the subsidy thereof. Many years ago, I owned a property on Federal Street that actually is now Tedford Housing. And I loved having subsidized tenants. I think we need to do more about getting out the advantages of that. I don't think it's just that we need more money for subsidized housing. We don't necessarily, I think we need to schmooze the people who have the housing, who need to understand there are huge advantages to dealing with. I mean, we had regular inspections, and boy, I got that check. There was no question. I mean, it wasn't like they weren't gonna pay me. So I think that's an aspect that's overlooked. We need to get the word out that it's really a good thing.
Thank you very much, Linda.
I was going to ask her to give me the mic since it was at our end of the table. Actually, just to piggyback briefly on what Linda said, I was an opponent of the housing bill right from the beginning. I ended up voting for it because it became better. And so part of this is about what I learned about the legislative process. I learned that that you can start with something that's huge, and then as a result of input from towns like the ones I represent in Georgetown, it became a much better bill. It's still not perfect, and I still have issues with it, and I'm working really hard to make sure that these things work for towns that I represent, all of which are under 3,000, and none of them have public water, and none of them have public sewer. But we are committed to working through all of these issues, and that's frankly what I love about doing this job. I'm a historian by trade, and I like finding answers. I like finding out how things work, and this is one of the things I love most about this job, so thank you.
Anybody else? Closing statement. What do you want us to hear? That's okay. They've got a plan all their own. That's good.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for being here tonight and for all of your questions. Every time I get to come to an event like this or I'm at the doors, I learn something. And for me, that's what it's all about. No matter the outcome in 3 weeks, getting to know everybody, getting to hear from you about what you care about has been really wonderful for me. So thank you all.
Orion Breen again. I loved what Allison said, that, she didn't like the bill at the start. And they worked through it. They made it better. People who don't like your bill still have ideas on how to make it better. We need to listen to those people. I talked a lot about investment. I believe these investments we make in childcare, education, housing, they're going to give us a return on that investment. It's going to improve our communities, our businesses, our economy. But investment isn't just about money. We were talking about energy and climate. Years ago, I was in AmeriCorps Vista, and that's like, it's like a domestic Peace Corps. Instead of sending somebody out to another country to build community there, you build community here. And at our exchange in Portland, where I was in AmeriCorps Vista, we had a weatherization program, and it's neighbors helping neighbors. You help somebody for an hour, and you can help weatherize their home, and then you can have someone else help you for an hour. And the idea is that everybody has something to give. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are. Everybody has talents. And if we harness the talents of the people of Maine, we can accomplish these things. It's going to take time. It's going to be messy, but we're going to make a difference. And this truly will be the way life should be. Thanks.
Thank you. So we spoke about a bunch of different issues tonight, and you've heard us, be able to touch upon a lot of things we're passionate about, but there's many reasons that I'm running for re-election that we didn't get to touch upon, from reproductive justice to agriculture to, being able to deal with student debt to honestly how much it costs every time you open your wallet and you're trying to fill up your tank. But all that being said, one of the things I really wanted to close on that I feel like unfortunately doesn't really get to make the news is how much Mainers really do work together. Having, had the honor to be a member of the Maine State Legislature, we really are bipartisan despite what you read in the news. I think probably about 90% of our bills are passed unanimously, and we work on meaningful compromises. Unfortunately, it's just not the sexiest headline for the newspapers. But I like to say that as much as I can. I have friends on both sides of the aisle, and I know everyone on here, would agree. You've heard us all talk a lot. I just want to take the time to say that our most important job is to listen to all of you. My door is always open, and all of us are made better from being able to work with all of you. So please reach out, and I'm really excited, and thanks for having us here tonight.
Oh, extra mic. Well, I want to thank you all for coming and bringing up some great questions and listening to us. The one thing I want to add to it is, Manny just said people working together. I haven't held an office position, but I was part of creating the LD 2003 on the Housing and Zoning Commission. And that was, like Ryan said, on bipartisan, the Chamber of Commerce and Maine People's Alliance, and everybody got together. I feel like with the housing crisis, if we move forward with that, we could get the same response, because a housing crisis, and one of the things I didn't get to say in this is it's affecting our workforce shortage so badly that there isn't an industry in the state that has a full workforce. And we're the oldest populist in the nation now. You know, we have had more people aging out of the workforce than deaths for well over 10 years now. So we get a lot of good volunteerism out of that, especially my district, like Harpswell Aging at Home and everything else like that. But if we don't fix our affordable housing crisis, we're not going to be able to fix our worker shortage crisis, which is affecting our entire state. But again, thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Yeah, yes, and thank you again. And the one thing I'd like to add is, in addition to sponsoring and passing legislation and finding legislative solutions in Augusta to all the problems we've been talking about tonight, we also offer constituent services to the folks at home in our districts. And that's where you folks come in, that you reach out to us, and the people who are live streaming with us. You reach out to us when you have a problem that is in any way related to our functioning as a state legislator. We have access. We cannot compel anybody in an administrative department at the state level to do anything, but we can connect you with resources. We can advocate for you. And we can also, because we know our communities well at home, we can work with our local government officials and try to accomplish good things here. And finally, the best thing we can all do in return for us representing you is to vote. We're all going to have the opportunity on November 8th to exercise our constitutional right to vote. And please do so. And I thank you in advance.
I could just say ditto, but no. Thank you. Thank you for holding this. Thank you for your interest. Thanks to everybody watching. Thank you to the fabulous Carol as well, now best friends, Carol. We are committed, as you can tell, to the details, to the time and attention to the public service. I know I run for Freeport to be the public servant, to do this public service in Freeport, because I care deeply about my community, as all of us here do. I would echo what Poppy said. Please go out and vote. Early vote, absentee voting, or in-person voting on November 8th. This is your right. Our elections are incredibly secure, but they need you to participate. So thank you so much for this evening.
I have been honored to be your moderator tonight. I'm going to turn this over to my friend Lynn Ellis.
So, candidates, thank you for coming tonight. It was a wonderful opportunity for us as your constituents to get to know you better and to hear about the issues that are a concern to all of us in our communities. Enacting legislation that improves the lives of Mainers is something all of us agree on. We wish you all the best in your campaigns. Please stick around and meet some of the folks who are here tonight if you're able. If you have to run off, I understand that as well. We're going to stay open for another little bit. And I just also want to say thank you to you all for coming. This was a great turnout, and we're really pleased to have been able to host this forum this evening. Good night.